And our final thread of the day is titled Mother-in-law Letting Toddler Destroy the Whole House. OP says, my toddler is 2 and has a habit of throwing things all over the place. We didn't want to baby-proof our whole house, so we gated off the family room and don't really have her go in other rooms unless it's mealtime, bath time, or bedtime. We basically supervise her in other rooms. Our family room contains most of her toys, and there's a TV. There's nothing dangerous or burdensome for her to get into. It just makes everything easier. And then I'm going to skip a bit because there's really a ton of content here. But essentially she says the kid spends a ton of time outside. So she has lots of space when she's frustrated. The problem is that the mother-in-law has a hippie way about her and has always had this attitude with her children. She thinks that children should explore. And it gets super annoying. I'm all for exploring, but not the kitchen while water is boiling, and not my jewelry box in my bedroom or my book collection that I don't want torn up. When the in-laws babysit, they frequently leave gates open, so a toddler gets out of the living room, which she knows that we don't like. We also have dangerous basement steps that are steep and lead to a cement floor. We keep the door locked, but it is a fear of mine. She says that my husband and I have been having in-laws babysit for short periods of time so we can get a date night once a month. And as soon as they come over, I feel like gates are left open. My mother-in-law will bring the daughter into her room and let her rifle through her clothes and drawers, throw books all over the ground and mix up all the shoes in her room, throw diaper supplies around. It really makes me upset and angry. I've said comments like, I don't like her going in there, messing everything up. I just clean this room and let's go back in the family room with toys. My mother-in-law will go out of her way to bring the toddler in my toddler's room. I get that it's my child's room, but it's mostly used for sleeping, diaper changes, and story time before bed, and I'm always in there or she's in her crib. And then she says, I don't want to stop letting them babysit, but I'm so sick of this hippie attitude of exploring all rooms and letting my daughter destroy the house. And then she says, what would you do? Does anyone have experience with this or with hippie grandparents? I sometimes wonder how my husband survived. Now, I found this entire thread a little bit obnoxious, to be completely honest. There is something about the way that OP talks about her child, which, like, I get it. Okay, she's a 2-year-old. She's very inquisitive. She's very curious. She wants to explore a lot. So she gets into everything. She obviously doesn't have a perception of cleaning up or not leaving behind a mess. So I understand why OP is annoyed in terms of, okay, maybe she's trying to keep her house super clean and the in-laws are not listening to her and not following her directions and so on. All that said, she's a child, and having your child locked essentially into one room in your whole house, and that's the only space that she's allowed to actually just be in and be free and roam, seems very restrictive to me, like way too restrictive. I can't quite comprehend why you would do that as a parent. I would baby-proof more rooms and then be a bit more okay with her spending time there. She says, hey, if her kid is spending time in other rooms, then they spend time supervised. And then she complains at the same time that the mother-in-law takes the daughter in her room with her and lets her rifle through her clothes and drawers, for example. Like, this is a pretty normal behavior. And so like, it's a kid who wants to explore some clothes. If the mother-in-law doesn't have a problem with her clothes being messy in the drawer, or if she's willing to fix them up herself afterwards, and if she's supervising the child so there's no safety risk, then I just don't understand what the problem is. It seems to me like the extent to which I could be empathetic here is if they are setting the kid loose and there's a safety concern where she's like, okay, this is a serious problem, in which case, fair enough. I would talk to them about that and say, hey, this is really a problem and we don't want her to get hurt. The other situation, which I might be a little bit sympathetic, is if they are setting the kid loose and then she makes a mess and then they kind of just leave the mess behind and go to the next room, make a mess there, go to the next room, make a mess there. And so I kind of understand both of those circumstances a little bit. But otherwise, no, actually, I don't think it's a very hippie attitude to think that your kids should be allowed to explore your house. And I would try to give as much space as possible in my house for my kids so that they can understand, like they can just engage with the world. As a 2-year-old, they're just trying to learn things, you know? And if that's figuring out clothes, if that's throwing things on the floor, because the concept of gravity is very interesting for children, so they like throwing things all the time, then I just don't understand what the big deal is. I think that dealing with the mess of a 2-year-old is just not that. Like, yes, it's messy, but it should not stop the kid from living a full life. And if the only way that you can engage with your child is by keeping her locked in one room, then your kid is not living a very full life. So I think OP is a little bit over the top, and I would try to step back a little bit, take a deep breath, really try to understand what is essential and what is not in terms of what level of restriction do I actually need to place on my kid's behavior, and how can I baby-proof more rooms in the house so that this is less likely to be a problem. Things like, hey, make drawers hard to open for kids, or cupboards difficult to open, those kinds of things like that. That should not be so difficult to do that it's impossible, right? Like, that's a pretty normal set of behaviors that you should do when your kids start becoming mobile and exploring other rooms in the house. So that's how I feel about this one. Some people will say, hey, at the end of the day, it's your house. You should return to it as you left it. Understandably, toddlers do get into stuff and make a mess, but you have a designated place for her to do that. I would bring it up again the next time they babysit. And yeah, it's fair enough, like your house, your rules. But also, if you're really unreasonable and if your in-laws actually fundamentally disagree with you, not that I think your in-laws have a right to disagree with you, but I would question if your husband is on the same page with regards to how the kids are interacting with the grandparents. And then if he's also on the same page and he thinks, hey, no, the kids should only be allowed in this one room, then that would be a conversation that I would ask him to have with them. Some people will ask things like, hey, can they babysit at their house instead? That way they can deal with the mess. And then OP says, hey, we don't trust them to babysit at their house because it's not baby proofed at all, and they leave out items that aren't good for a toddler, like glass dishes and breakables. I think they try not to let her get into bad items, but I feel like they are slow reacting, old, or slow moving. And then that sounds to me like there is a safety concern. Alternatively, for example, you could help them baby proof their house, you know, and then be like, all right, now you can spend time here. You can let her explore to whatever extent you want. She can't reach anything that's dangerous to her by herself. Therefore, it's fine. Like, that would be a solution that you could come up with and you could offer, and then they don't have to do it, and you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, if you think that your in-laws can't react fast enough to look after your baby, then maybe that's the problem. And the next comment is from this person. She says, you're being ridiculous. I don't know any parent that allows the child in one room. That's crazy and won't fly for much longer when they can climb and open the gate. I can't believe that they already don't. You need to stop expecting a spotless toddler-free home because, surprise, you have a toddler. And OP gets very defensive here. She says, my child goes in every room in my house, but not unattended. And I don't allow my kid to take out all the pots and pans or dump all the clothes in every drawer. Our family room is pretty much a playroom. I think it's pretty typical to have a playroom. My toddler doesn't climb or open gates. I know eventually it will change, but I don't think it's weird to keep dangerous items out of reach. It's called being responsible. And then the next reply is from another person who says, how are pots and pans dangerous or clothes? I just don't understand the concept of confining your child to a single room. They are not a dog, especially their own room. And to that, I would agree. I honestly, I don't think that you should be confining your kid into one room. It's not so much about the mess as it is about giving your kid the sense of freedom and ability to explore the world and interact with it without you needing to be there all the time. Like, this screams a little bit to me of helicopter parenting, of someone who's so worried about any possible thing that the child might get into or that they might do that she's like, hey, I need to be 100% in control and supervising her 150% of the time. There will not be a single second that she spends out of my direct eyesight or in an environment where I have not touched every single item there. And I get some element of that. Like, I do think baby proofing is important and so on. But there's a point at which it becomes totally unreasonable and totally stressful. And you just create so many problems for yourself with that attitude. Like, I would, if my kid was really interested in clothes, I would let her play with clothes. And then eventually I would help her and teach her how to fold them up, how to put them away. Like, we would make it a thing that we do together and that we spend time on together, rather than it being this thing that she's not allowed to do. And of course, as a child, she will always covet the things that she's not allowed to do. So fundamentally, I think more relaxed parenting, like just being okay with a little bit of mess, is a much healthier style to parent in general than to convince yourself that you can control absolutely every aspect of your kids and what they do all the time.